Number 5 by your nap line request at WNAP.
Wish Wonderland, WISH.
You can relive the 60s and 70s and learn what rock and roll radio in Indianapolis was like during that era at a program entitled Naptown Rock Radio Wars on Saturday, April 20th at 2 p.m. here at Central Library. Included in the day's activities will be a showing of the documentary film by that name and a panel of local DJs who were very popular and memorable from that era. With us is Dave Fulton, who is a filmmaker and author and has a large hand in planning this event. And Dave, what a fun day you've got scheduled on April 20th. It is free and open to the public, but give us an idea of what's in store for that day.
I can't tell you how excited I am about this, John, because the 20th is going to be really special for this town because we're going to have a who's who of legendary radio personalities coming in for a panel discussion, a showing of the film in a form that's never been shown before in this town. And we have a couple of ideas too for some games that we can play, audience participation. So it'll be an afternoon of really immersing yourself into what radio was like in Indianapolis in the 60s and 70s.
The film will be shown at 2 p.m. for people if they want to start planning their calendar for that day. So tell us about the film Naptown Rock Radio Wars. Tell us the story of that.
Briefly, it's a history of rock and roll radio in Indianapolis. It's primarily in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it was a 4-year project that we had. We started working on this in 2007, I think is when we first talked about it. It was put together with Al Stone, who was one of the first co-programming directors at WNAP in 1968, and Brad Schuchard, who was a producer and editor on the film. But we tracked people down from coast to coast. We got Jim Hilliard and George Johns and Roger W. Morgan, and we were able to find these people and kind of preserve their memories of what radio was like in those days. And we've put all this together with rock and roll music and jingles that people haven't heard in 40 years, and it's pretty exciting.
And you also have recently published a book by that name.
I have. Thank you for bringing that up, John. Naptown Rock Radio Wars, the book. This is a companion to the film that came out. This is a bit different from the film. Obviously, it's in print form, but beyond that, there are a lot of pictures in here and stories and descriptions that I would have loved to have worked into the film somehow, and I wasn't able to. So having this in book format really sort of was a whole different, outside-the-box kind of mindset for how to present the story.
And you can look for the book here at the library in the collection or at local bookstores. But again, the film, Naptown Rock Radio Wars, will be at 2 p.m. followed by a panel discussion. And I think people will get a real kick out of this because DJs will be here live and in person from that era. Who have you got lined up so far?
Well, gosh, and this is the part that's so exciting. We have 9 people coming in, myself plus 8 others. And among those 8 are going to be Chris Connor, who was one of the original disc jockeys at WNAP. He started there in 1968 and was part of that sign-on. And he stayed at WNAP until the early 80s. Reb Porter, a lot of people know him as the voice of the Indiana Pacers at the Pacer games, and he retired just recently from that. But before he was with the Pacers, Reb Porter was the Rebel on WIFE. And he was there during the entire 60s. He was one of the rock star DJs that they had. Bill Shirk of WXLW was always a maverick in Indianapolis radio. He took a daytime station and made it a real powerhouse in the early 70s. Which nobody said could be done. Fast Freddie Fever, a legendary air personality in town. Ann Craig, who's been part of Indianapolis radio for years, and she's been at both WIFE and WNAP. Jimmy Mack, James McDowell will be there. And Jimmy Mack was part of WIRE in the late 50s, and he's one of the few people that remains in Indianapolis who really knows radio going all the way back into the 50s.
So you've got the film, you've got the panel discussion with the memorable DJs. Other games and activities you've got planned?
We have a couple. We want to do a 60s and 70s version of Name That Tune. To see how good people's musical knowledge is, and there will be prizes to the winners of that. And then we want to do a new game called Hit the Post. And you may remember old disc jockeys, a song would start playing and there'd be the introduction and the disc jockey would talk right up to the vocals. I'd like to see how well some of the people in our audience can do with that.
Sounds fantastic. April 20th on a Saturday beginning at 2 p.m. here at Central Library. We're speaking with Dave Fulton. Dave, the name Naptown Rock Radio Wars would denote a little bit of competition among the stations to attract listeners during that time. But was it really all that serious, or did creativity happen just as a result of fun and trying to just be creative?
It was a little bit of both, because back in those days, radio stations were owned by a person as opposed to a corporation. WNAP and WIBC were owned by Fairbanks Broadcasting, which was in turn owned by Richard Fairbanks, a guy, and then WIFE was owned by Don Burden, who owned the star stations, which was again a guy. And so what it boiled down to was this Herculean battle between Don Burden and Richard Fairbanks. They were serious as a heart attack about owning the radio waves here in town in terms of listenership. The disc jockeys were allowed to have a creative field day with their promotions and their contests and ways to get the audience and community involved in what that radio station was doing.
The personalities kind of ruled the day. You listen to a station because you liked a particular radio personality.
Yeah, it's unlike today. Today, radio tends to be a lot more sterile than it was back then. Back then, the radio DJs were really the rock stars. They were the people that, it was like, as Freddie Fever says in the documentary, it was like Tom Cruise. I mean, that's the way people looked at them. But I sure hope people can come out on the 20th. We have Dr. Spin here, the world's only vinyl DJ. And it's free and open to the public.
Well, that is so key. And talk about nostalgia and how much we're all looking forward to this here at the library. It's the Naptown Rock Radio Wars. Thanks to you, Dave Fulton, for helping put this together. Free and open to the public. And for more information, you can visit the library's website at ndpl.org.